Now, I would like to present the next speaker. From our neighbor country, Norway. She is the State Secretary for Research and Higher Education, and she has a PhD in political science from Oslo University. Please welcome Aase Marthe Johansen Horrigmo, who will present the Norwegian Program for Center of Excellence, which has been running for more than 20, or for almost 20 years,
almost
I think.
20 years,
yes.
Yeah.
Please welcome.
Thank you.
Aase.
And thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to be here. For me, as a former researcher and evaluator of research initiatives and research programs, it's quite interesting to be here and to listen to all of the previous speakers. So I'm really glad that I was invited to come here. I'm to talk about our quest for excellence in Norway and how we've addressed some of the issues that's been discussed and evaluated here today, and to present our program center initiative. A lot has been said today about excellence and that we strive towards excellence. But the question is also a little bit, why do we do that? We know that research and higher education play a key role in the development of a society that is environmentally and economically sustainable, as well as socially, culturally, and politically sustainable. And these are all issues that I think, again, have grown in importance and also are more clear in the debate. And it kind of also relates a little bit to the relevance and the impact side of excellence, although excellence is also a goal in itself. But we also know that high quality research and education are crucial to ensuring high employment rates and a viable business sector, which is also important goals for us, especially as politicians. And they are also absolutely necessary for the continued stable development of the Norwegian, or I might say the Scandinavian welfare societies. So the Norwegian government, as I guess the same goes for the Swedish government, we've high ambitions for our research and higher education. However, knowledge development is driven by more than ambitious goals and targets. In many cases, it is curiosity-driven research that has led to the most extraordinary results and also impact. But moreover, it takes time to accumulate knowledge, which is why it is necessary to employ a long-term perspective and be willing to allocate the necessary resources. I quite like to frame the term you used, that you need to be able to recover from failure, which is actually a very nice way of handling high risk in a bit, maybe like a risk deflecting manner. But I like the term, I'm going to take that with me. But it also means that research doesn't come cheap. We need to take risk, I guess, but we also need the stamina, as I think was mentioned before, and the money. But what we did to develop world-leading research groups in Norway was to establish the Centers of Excellence, or in Norwegian, Center for Fremragende Forskning, back in 2002. So in 2 years' time, we will be 20 years old. And in the years that followed since this scheme was introduced, we have developed several other centers and initiatives. And I think among the most important ones are the Centers for Research-Based Innovation and the Centers for Environment-Friendly Energy Research. The primary objective for all of these centers is to conduct targeted and long-term research. These schemes or initiatives were established in a situation where evaluations of Norwegian research had shown that we had relatively few researchers and research groups that could be termed excellent. So we had, I guess, what we can call an excellence gap compared to other countries. And there was therefore quite a strong support at the time for the idea of allocating larger grants to excellent research or aspiring towards excellency research groups rather than distributing the money equally to all. However, the evaluations have continued to show that we still have relatively few excellent research groups, but they've also shown that the situation is improving and that the concentrated efforts are working. Thus, even though Norway accounts for less than 1% of the world's total research effort, we are among the leading nations in some areas, such as marine science and climate research. What we've seen is that allocating large research grants is a very effective tool in governing science, of course. People go where the money is. But that means that it should also be used with some caution, I think, because it affects directly the scope, the content, direction, and impact of public research. And there are several dilemmas, as I think have been shown here today, concerning research excellence initiatives. Firstly, excellency is not the only goal for research policy. It might not even be the primarily goal of a research policy. Specialization and division of labor, access to academic environments across the country, as well as innovation and collaboration with the working life and the business sector are among other important goals. So while strong concentration of resources may give us excellence in a few fields, more moderate degrees of concentration may give us more and much needed flexibility and variety of perspectives. So we must therefore find a balance or a healthy balance between concentration and dispersal. And perhaps one could add then the dilemma of high risk, high gain, and the fear of failure in this dilemma area. But in my opinion, we need to ask ourselves what gives the highest value for the money or the most bang for the buck. Is it large portions of funding allocated to a small number of scientists, or is it smaller portions allocated across more numerous research teams and more diverse research topics? And I think here we could also reflect a bit about your point on how there is somewhat of a winner takes it all dynamic, which perhaps adds to our lust to put money in fewer areas in order to be one among the winners within some areas. And with the large and complex societal challenges that research must address, it is also a question of whether current allocation mechanisms are good enough to reward interdisciplinarity, which is another issue that I think concerns us not just in Norway, but also across borders. But despite these dilemmas, I still believe we must continue our policy to stimulate excellency and excellent research. We must do this both to further develop the outstanding research groups we already have, but also to develop new ones. And we must do this both to be competitive in areas that are important to Norway, what's in it for us, and to help meet global societal challenges. So maybe competition, large size grants, and performance orientation are particularly needed in our Norwegian system. Because this is a system that is fairly rooted in egalitarian culture and where universities and colleges have a share of basic funding that is greater than in almost all other countries. But a strong commitment to excellence depends on refills from below and good recruitment policies. And over time, therefore, the Research Council of Norway has developed its funding scheme to better meet the needs of researchers at various stages of the research career. The funding scheme for independent projects, dubbed FRIPRO in Norwegian, is an open competitive arena that provides funding for basic groundbreaking projects in all fields of research. And over the last few years, the Research Council has developed FRIPRO into a chain of instruments aimed at respectively young research talents and more established researchers, and finally, outstanding research groups. In this way, FRIPRO has evolved into an important qualifying arena for seeking funding from the Centers of Excellence scheme and from, of course, the European Research Council. So our national scheme for investment in research infrastructure is of great importance for developing world-class research in Norway. And over the past 10 years, every 2 years, we've allocated funds to around 25 large, complex national projects. And in recent years, the allocations has been on 1 billion Norwegian kroner each time. So the topic here today is the evaluation of the Swedish centers. However, I'm speaking of the Norwegian centers of excellence, which we are also evaluating. But the evaluation isn't done yet. I think it will be done around May. But the evaluation will, I think, follow along the lines of some of the other evaluations presented here. They will see or look for if the initiatives have increased scientific quality in Norway and whether it has had effects on the research system in general. So there is both a systemic approach and an evaluation of the initiatives. It's also an international evaluation panel, and it will also make recommendations for further development of the Norwegian Center of Excellence initiative. So at the Ministry of Education and Research, we are eager to see the evaluation results. We have a total of 44 centers of excellence that have received grants for 2 times 5 years. So far, the Research Council of Norway has awarded 3.6 billion Norwegian kroner to these centers. And in addition, the Council has signed contracts to pay an additional 2.4 billion kroner. So it's a large investment for us. I think there is also here an issue that's been mentioned before with co-payment and so on. And the Research Council grants accounts for about a quarter of the total budget of the centers. And the total funding invested in centers of excellence by the Research Council amounts to approximately 1% of public allocations to research and development in Norway over the years from 2004 until 2017. But as I mentioned, we still have to wait a few months before we have the results of the evaluation. But I do have a few points, some data that I would like to comment and that we've prepared for the International Evaluation Committee. Of course, bibliometrics are important. Data from the report, Bibliometric Analysis and Career Mapping of the SFF scheme by NIFU indicates a high activity in the centers. The researchers within the centers have been involved in more than 30% of Norway's top cited articles, the top 1%, and 45% of Norwegian ERC grants during the period from 2007 to 2018. And another finding at this early stage is that the centers of excellence have shifted the general Norwegian international cooperation pattern, which is also important. And what we see is that they move towards the most influential research institutions in the world. And I think we're very happy with that shift. And at the same time, the bibliometry report shows large variations among the centers. 2, perhaps 3 centers in each generation account for a large share of the publications. So an early conclusion may be that some of the centers of excellence are producing groundbreaking research. And in addition, the probability of observing groundbreaking research is higher at the Center of Excellence than in Norwegian research in general. However, again, the variation is quite big. Researcher training is another important component of the center's activities. PhD students and postdocs represent a significant proportion of the research at the centers. The centers employed 456 PhD students in 2018, which corresponds to 8% of all PhD students in Norway. They employed 274 postdocs, which is about 14% of all the postdocs in Norway. And in addition, the completion rate for these recruits is very good. For those of us who are not researcher or as I, an outdated researcher at the very best, it's perhaps most exciting to learn that generous and long-term support for good research environments actually does help to bring the world forward. The available data actually shows that basic research from the centers does have a societal effect. Even though this was not a criteria when we started the scheme, it seems to have somewhat happened anyway. And a substantial part of the center participants report that the center has increased their interaction with the society, the business sector, in terms of involvement in knowledge transfer activities and research dissemination outside of the academia. And I would like to use the opportunity to present a few examples of the societal effects. The Aquaculture Protein Center at the Research Institute Nofima was set up in 2003, has given us an important foundation for future work on fish feed, which is a big business or industry in Norway. And of course, that is of high relevance to the aquaculture sector and to the economy. And upon its closure, the center had created a knowledge platform that later led to the establishment of a new center for research-based innovation. The Bjerknes Center for Climate Research, originally set up under the Center of Excellence scheme in 2002, has become one of the key climate research centers globally. Today, Bjerknes has 230 scientists from 37 countries. And investigators at the Center for the Biology of Memory at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology discovered the neural elements of a circuit that codes for position in the mammalian brain. These elements are also part of our memory system. And the discovery of the key component, the grid cells, actually brought them here to Stockholm, as they was recognized with the Nobel Peace Prize, the Nobel Prize in 2014. And I'm of course speaking of May-Britt and Edvard Moser. An important success factor of the centers is the considerable length of support, as you mentioned. The scheme provides long-term but not permanent financing. It's thought that after 10 years of operation, the successful centers would be sufficiently competitive to obtain funding elsewhere and to be supported by their host institutions. And after all, we only contribute with 25% of the center's budget. But it turns out that how to best handle the ending of the center period has been a topic of much debate. What do you do when the money runs out? So since the start of the Center of Excellence scheme, a total of 21 centers have ended their project periods. Some of the currently active centers have their origin in previous centers, so they managed to get new funding. and others have found external funding through other sources, such as the European Research Council, other programs within the Research Council of Norway, as well as the Norwegian scheme of centers for research-based innovation. So many of the now terminated centers have been able to continue some, but perhaps not all of their activities, and perhaps under a different organizational umbrella or name. So in the current long-term plan for research and education, we discuss whether there is a need for a funding instrument with an even longer time horizon for Norway's most exceptional research groups. But in my opinion, it is primarily the responsibility of the host institution to secure long-term and predictable financing for the best research groups. The reason is that we believe that it is important to retain some dynamic, I think you call it turbulence, and in both within the scheme and in the research system as a whole. And that would be more difficult in a system of centers with semi-permanent funding. However, to help resolve the problem, we've made one important adjustment to the Center of Excellence scheme. While previously we had a restriction on applying for a second time, the government opened this opportunity in 2018. So in conclusion, I'd like to say that the goal of developing more world-leading research groups still stands. Hopefully, the forthcoming evaluation will give us new knowledge that can be used to develop the center schemes. But I will also add that in addition to stimulating scientific quality, we want centers of excellence and other research council initiatives to have effects on the research system as a whole. Such effects may, for example, be to influence the internal priorities of the institutions or contribute to collaboration across disciplines. However, the most important reason for pursuing our goal of world-leading research groups is that large, concentrated efforts are a more efficient way to counter the major societal challenges that we are facing. So in contrast to more individually oriented grant schemes like those of the European Research Council, the Norwegian Centers of Excellence may bring together researchers from different disciplines and address more complex research questions. We might even help to contribute our bit into help to address the grand societal challenges that we face. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Aase, for sharing your experiences with us, and we're looking forward to read the evaluation coming up